Welcome to Centered Presents The Future of Health. Join me, Christina Waleka, along with Dr. Molly Brown, as we dive deep into the world of brain-based wellness.
In each episode, we will explore cutting-edge insights and practical techniques that empower you to achieve optimal health and super high-energy living.
Tune in and start your journey toward a healthier, more vibrant you.
Welcome to our podcast. Centered Presents The Future of Health explores solution and results-based care. This podcast discusses the development of the VASPR machine, a machine that increases testosterone and strengthening hormones and greatly accelerates sports recovery at high levels of human performance while decreasing stress hormones and cortisol within a 21-minute workout. Peter Wasowski is the founder and CEO of VASPR Systems. Peter developed his machine through his own blood sugar issues and desire to create solutions without being dependent on insulin or pharmaceuticals. With testosterone and hormones at an all-time low, this machine is a real solution for this imbalance. Not only does the VASPR increase testosterone and decrease cortisol, it elevates mood and sports recovery. Everyone should be using it. As we look towards the future of healthcare, a future that empowers individuals, prevents chronic illness and pain, regulates and calms the nervous system, listen in as we discuss the passion behind innovative health solutions and solution-based care. Please enjoy our episode with myself, Christina Waleka, and Peter Wasowski.
Well, Peter, thank you for joining us on today's episode of Centered Presents The Future of Health. We are very, very excited to have you here. I know that you are the founder, developer, creator of the VASPR. And if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit with our audience, for those who don't know, what is the VASPR and how did you create it?
Thank you. Well, the name VASPR stands for vascular performance. That's where the name came from. I have designed and created a number of products in my life. I'm 76. The reason VASPR was created is when I moved with my family from California to the big island of Hawaii, I realized that the minute I moved into the tropics, some of the health issues or health challenges that I had became quite acute in Hawaii. So I had arthritic ankles from two separate fractures, and I was pre-diabetic. My grandfather died of diabetes. I was all of a sudden in pretty strong pain medications. I remember when I didn't have the pain meds in me and I had to get up at night to go to the bathroom, I had to go on my hands and knees. I couldn't put any weight on my feet. And I was about to start a whole full protocol of insulin, which is not something that adds to the quality of your life, just the opposite. So I wanted to basically design something that addresses the root cause rather than treat symptoms. So that's how VASPR happened.
No, I know one of the things you talk about is proactive health instead of reactive health. And I think that's a really great way to live your life. We want to be proactive, and instead of people trying to recover from whatever it is they're suffering from, like not even have that issue in the first place.
Well, the truth is that a human body does a beautiful job regenerating itself. So it is quite unfortunate that many people, rely on pills or chemicals or whatever else, and they don't realize that these things actually treat the symptoms. They don't treat the root cause. It's a very, very good process for the pharmaceuticals and people that make money on it, but from an organic, natural point of view, obviously it doesn't work.
Right. I almost feel like the faith in your body's ability to heal has been lost, right? Like people don't even give it a chance before they're harming it with maybe pharmaceuticals or surgeries. But yeah, I mean, we see every day, like this regenerative power. And so can you tell us a little bit too with the VASPR, how it creates an increase in hormones and decreases the stress hormones, how it improves sports performance, and how it accelerates recovery? Because I've experienced all those benefits, and I feel like the VASPR is amazing.
Thank you so much. So obviously, any doctor or anybody who is smart as far as physiology would agree that exercise is the foundation of health. If you don't exercise, you cannot really maintain health. Most people do not exercise because they don't like the side effects of exercise. If you get on a treadmill for 45 minutes or half an hour, you sweat. It takes you at least the same time to recover from it. You have to be really motivated, and then you have to be ready for the recovery and possible injuries and whatever happens. Being I guess, organically lazy. I didn't really want to go into very intense exercise. And so I just try to figure out something that could give us this effects of intense exercise without the intensity and without the side effects. So that's basically how VASPR was born. It took me 8 years to figure this out. Again, I was not on a schedule. It was just my own research on myself. And being pre-diabetic and having traumatic arthritis, living in the tropics, I had to obviously increase my quality of life. Otherwise, it would go downhill. And the only mainstream medicine choices I had was insulin and for diabetes, and then of course pain medication for arthritis. Neither one of these were something I wanted to get stuck using for a long period of time.
What made you know that? Because I think, again, a lot of people, maybe they don't listen to their gut or whatnot, but what made you know you didn't want to kind of follow the program that doctors were prescribing you?
That's a good question, Christina. So it's my history, basically. When I was about your age, or maybe even a little younger, you must be in your early 20s, right?
30, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty close. You look like you're 19 or 20, but anyway.
I get that a lot. It's the VASPR.
Exactly. So when I was at that age, my dream was to become a neurosurgeon. I thought that was the ultimate future that I would have, is to become a neurosurgeon. And before jumping into that, I became a physician's assistant to a neurosurgeon. So I got to see what it's like in the kitchen side, and I did that for a year. And most of the people that we operated on died on a table. So my job was to go outside and face the family and tell them that their son or daughter or brother or sister, just died on a table, which was not a fun process to go through. And I decided I didn't want to do that as a job, obviously. What I found interesting at that time is that when I saw engineers talking to doctors, there was a very little communications going on, because the engineer would have his own language, quite often his own ego. Doctor, the same thing. So it was just like speaking two different languages. You cannot communicate. And I knew the anatomy and physiology pretty well by that time, and I learned the engineering language, so I became a useful interpreter in those conversations. So instead of spending 2 or 3 years trying to design a piece of equipment that didn't work like the doctor wanted at the end of the design process, we would spend less than half the time, and it did what it's supposed to do, and the doctor was happy. So that's basically what I did. I've spent most of my life, I'm 76 now, so well over 50 years in designing different pieces of equipment and devices that I designed. But basically the whole thing had to do with organic results. I like organic process of supporting physiology rather than trying to manipulate it.
You just focused on the solution you wanted.
On the solution in the most direct organic process. So again, exercise is not something I enjoyed. Again, being lazy and not liking the side effects. When you're on VASPR, of course, you're sitting on a chair. Nothing could be more comfortable than that. And then you're doing a very low impact exercise. However, your brain, especially your endocrine system, thinks that you just ran up a big mountain and did CrossFit on top of it, because what we're doing is we're forcing concentration of lactic acid in the blood. And pituitary gland in your brain monitors not the amount of lactic acid in the blood, but the concentration of lactic acid. So the higher the concentration, the more anabolic hormones you need required to rebuild those muscles back to pre-exercise condition. if you do CrossFit or any other intense exercise, quite often the damage to the muscle tissue, the microtrauma to the muscle tissue is so significant that the pituitary gland does not have the capacity to completely rebuild it. So this is known as overtraining. Now, overtraining is something that is quite common with athletes. So the concept here was to be able to complete a 20-minute exercise protocol. If you say, okay, you're going to exercise for 20 minutes while you're sitting on a chair, most people say, yeah, that's pretty cool. And I'm not lifting weights, I'm not running, this is okay. Plus, you're being cooled.
Not sweating excessively.
You don't want to sweat.
Exactly. So that's like a dream come true for a lazy person who doesn't like exercise, which is most people. So basically, there's three principles behind VASPR. The first one has to do with blood flow restriction exercise. So whenever we compress a muscle, we actually are concentrating lactic acid underneath the compression. So even though the muscle is not damaged, that signal to the brain, to the pituitary gland, basically says you just run up a 2,000-foot mountain and the CrossFit on top of it. And the brain responds as though you did that. So you're getting this anabolic hormones designed to rebuild the muscle, which in this case are not damaged. So you basically end up with surplus anabolic hormones, which is pretty cool. And that is actually what is responsible for what we consider VASPR effect. You're not killing yourself. You're sitting on a chair. You're being cooled. If either one of us was on VASPR and the other person was standing next to you, we would have the same kind of conversation. You're not huffing and puffing. But the physiological response is quite significant. So I thought that was pretty cool. And when I started using it myself, I found that I actually found it to be too good to be true. So this was, again, on the island, and I was involved in outrigger canoe racing, those long, very thin canoes with an outrigger. I was in a club that, it was called Kauai High Canoe Club. And we would go out on these canoes 3 times a week, early in the morning, and sometimes we would race each other. So the strongest person on a canoe was the number one person, number one seat, because that's when you're pushing significant amount of water, and you're pushing quiet water. Everybody behind you is moving to your rhythm. So the strongest person on the canoe was number one seat. And after I started using this very crude VASPR prototype for a while, the coach put me in the first seat, in the number one seat, and I turned around and everybody behind me was half my age. So when we came back to the port, all these guys stood around me and said, "Peter, what kind of drugs are you on?"
Yeah. At this point, was it just with the blood flow restriction, or did you have the cooling and the grounding yet?
I had it all, yes. I mean, it took me 8 years to figure it out, and I read the book Body Electric by Dr. Robert Becker. So that's all about grounding. Again, I had a lot of time on my hands, and it was actually fun. So I was doing that. When we had this day where everybody was surprised that I was 50 years old at that time. This was 26 years ago, but everybody else was in their 20s, just like Christina. And so the younger kids were really not interested in trying this. I offered it to people. I said, "Look, anybody that wants to come and try it, I have a lab behind my house, and you're welcome to come." But I had older men. They were all men, and there was a 60-year-old, 65, 70-year-old, a couple of other men in their own same age group that would come on a regular basis, 3-4 times a week. We would go paddling, and then they would come up and use VASPR. And after a few weeks, there was this woman that showed up that I've never met before, and turns out she was a wife of one of these paddlers that was using VASPR, and she sat next to me and says, "Peter, I don't think you know the meaning of menopause." And I was surprised. Why is she asking me that? And I said, "Well, obviously not from personal experience, but I know what it is." And he says, "No, you don't. Menopause means man on pause." He says, "What the heck have you done to my husband? I was enjoying menopause. Life was great. Now this guy wants sex all the time." So this was actually a big aha moment for me, because that's when I realized that we are triggering the endogenous anabolic hormones. And to my knowledge, nobody has done that ever before. So then I got very, very serious, and I spent many, many hours every day for the next 8 years to go from a very crude prototype to a real usable product.
I mean, it really is. It is amazing because testosterone is at such a low currently, even in 20-year-olds, right? Like I've worked with military vets, and they try and put them on testosterone replacement therapy at age, 25 through 29.
Yeah, so you know what happens when you go on testosterone, on any hormone replacement therapy, you're basically killing the downstream metabolic effect.
Making it worse. Yeah.
Yeah, you basically are not, you're going backwards, and you don't have a happy individual at the end of the day.
So it's incredible that the VASPR, I mean, it has this like almost magnetic effect, but that it increases your strengthening hormones, correct?
Well, yeah, it provides you a benefit of intense exercise, which is quite enjoyable because you don't have to do CrossFit or run up a hill or suffer for 2 hours to recover from it. And at the same time, of course, there's a very significant endocrine process where you increase the endocrine function, because by compressing the muscle, you signal the brain that there's a significant muscle damage, where in fact there's zero muscle damage. So you're getting this surplus anabolic hormones you would never have access to otherwise. I think it just organically happened when I was doing this. I'm obviously not a PhD or somebody that would look at it from a science perspective. It was just organic process, and I believe it came through me, not from me.
I would assume it, like the different elements from just the lazy machine to the cooling aspects to the grounding part. Again, you have to be very intentional, and it sounds like you are an intentional person, and reading and learning and growing. Like most people wouldn't incorporate grounding into an exercise machine. That's just like a whole nother element. That's incredible that you decided to incorporate.
Thank you. I mean, are you familiar with Dr. Becker's work? He wrote a book, Body Electric, and was twice nominated for Nobel Prize in Medicine. This was Dr. Robert Becker. And in early 60s, that's where autoimmune disease took off started taking off on a steeper level. And what Dr. Becker discovered is that a lot of the autoimmune disease issues were connected to synthetic clothing. This is when we started wearing nylon shirts and different types of synthetics, because they were tight and they looked sexy. But when those synthetic surfaces rub against each other, they create static charge. And that static charge goes inside your body, which is oxidant inflammatory energy. And then you go outside and you have rubber underneath your shoes, you have rubber soles, so you have no way to discharge that static charge to the ground. And your autoimmune system has no idea how to deal with that. It just goes crazy, and that's where autoimmune diseases took off. So Dr. Becker looked at the entire planet at that time, early 60s, and he learned that there was one country that did not report autoimmune disease at all. And that country was India. So he flew to India, and he realized that most people he was watching were wearing cotton clothing, and they were barefoot. So whatever static charge they would generate would get discharged to the ground. But most importantly, they had access to negative electrons from the ground. That's the key. So we used his research in designing VASPR. So you're obviously barefoot on VASPR. Your feet are on brass plates. Brass is a very conductive metal. And underneath that brass plates, you have copper tubes with water that cool those plates, but they also take all that static charge from you through the water to the chiller, which is grounded. You're basically dumping all of the static charge that you had when you started, and then you pick up negative electrons, the same pathway. So after 20 minutes on VASPR, you're 100% electrically neutral, which does amazing things for immunity, natural immunity. And of course, with pandemic, natural immunity was a big deal, still is. So prior to the pandemic, we would sell 50% of this equipment to private homes and the other 50% to sports teams, chiropractors, hospitals, medical offices like yours. And right now, over 80% of this equipment is sold to private homes. And the main reason is the immunity aspect, natural immunity.
So have you seen a huge increase in awareness about your company since the pandemic?
The biggest increase during the pandemic was that a lot of people at home were buying it. It just organically happened, basically. And I don't think there is as much awareness as there should be. That's why I'm grateful for this podcast that we are on, because that's how you spread awareness. And most people are still taking the path of least resistance. Like, if you're sick, you take some chemical to feel better. But most people don't realize that that chemical doesn't actually address the root cause. It just temporarily treats the symptom, where VASPR addresses the root cause.
Yeah, I think the VASPR is representing like a shift in how we approach health and fitness kind of combined into one.
That whole disconnect from ourselves and sort of our consciousness with our subconscious. Have you noticed on a side note that people's awareness about their health and their consciousness has increased with this machine?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So hormonal balance means emotional balance as well. When you're hormonally balanced, you're emotionally balanced as well. So it does lead to that. And people report, feeling much better emotionally. There's three factors that go into it. So the first one is the vascular compression that we discussed, and how that what that does, basically simulating intense exercise without intensity. Second is the temperature control. And of course, each one of us knows what it's like to sweat during conventional exercise. And when we sweat, there's a significant amount of blood that needs to go to the skin in order to promote conventional cooling, how our bodies were designed. And each one of us has a very specific amount of blood on board, which happens to be 8% of your body weight. So if you're looking at a 100-pound person, there's 8 pounds of blood in there. And if that person exercising conventionally is doing conventional exercise, significant amount of that blood goes to the skin, which means you don't have enough blood at the muscle level that's needed to remove the lactic acid and recover the muscle. That's why you have sore muscles for a day or two afterwards. So we've addressed that problem with VASPR, and that's the cooling perspective. And the idea is not to sweat. When you don't sweat, all of the blood that you need is at the muscle level. That's why you don't have sore muscles afterwards, because the lactic acid gets removed in real time. It's a cool concept, and it's a very organic process. It's not something that requires chemicals or special type of manipulation or whatever. It's addressing the physiology from the point of view of how the physiology truly works.
I've heard you say on a couple times that you've seen a really positive effect with neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's. Why do you think you see those results, and what results have you seen?
So, yeah, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, we've seen massive improvement with people who have MS. All of it has to do with perfusion and increasing the blood flow, along with optimizing the hormonal profile. So, in order to get the hormonal response, the endocrine response from a conventional exercise, first of all, you would never be able to get it. You would have to exercise a significant amount of intensity. And by the time you recover from it, whatever additional hormonal response you generated had to be utilized to rebuild the body back to pre-exercise condition. Over here, we are not damaging the muscle tissue, so you're getting this surplus anabolic hormones, which is beautiful. And again, hormonal balance leads to emotional balance, so you feel great. I mean, again, I'm sure from your experience, but your experience matches the experience of most people that who use VASPR, and they feel great afterwards. After 20 minutes on VASPR, you just feel great. All of a sudden, some of those dark negative thoughts maybe are not as prominent or go away completely. And all of that has to do with being able to exercise without paying the price of the side effects of conventional exercises. Gives you ability to exercise with intensity without the side effect.
Well, it's funny you keep saying for lazy people, because like some of, I've seen the results with athletes too, and they just skyrocket their performance. And some of the athletes, like high level athletes I've used the VASPR with, they just all of a sudden they have noticeable increases in their strength and their training in whatever team they're on. 30 to 50% increases in strength gains. So because of that, my kids want to start using the VASPR. But what is the youngest age do you think that you could use it?
The youngest person using VASPR is 10 years old.
Okay.
And the oldest is 97 years old.
Amazing.
So as long as you have 2 arms and 2 legs,
you can use it. Okay.
You can benefit from it. Yeah. So obviously a 10-year-old would not, nobody, you would never prescribe VASPR for a 10-year-old. That wouldn't make any sense. They do that organically. They run around and do that organically. But we are actually quite resilient from the time we're born to the time you go through puberty. Once you go through puberty, there's 3 factors that take us backwards. First of course, is that we have more real estate in those muscles. We can no longer concentrate lactic acid like we did as children. And the higher the concentration, the stronger the response from the endocrine system. So that's the first one. The second one, we don't have time to run around all day when we get older. So that's another negative. And the last one is that we are closer to our genetically predetermined adult height, which means that our natural hormone levels are getting to the point where you're reaching the adult height, and therefore your hormonal production or hormonal output is lower. So there is, the term biohacking is something that is quite well known and often spoken, but I don't actually I don't agree with that terminology, and I think it's quite confusing, because the minute you say biohacking, that's exactly what you're doing. You're biohacking, you have no idea what the result is going to be.
I'm glad you say that, because I also don't like that term.
It basically means that you're creating your own biology. The term that is correct term to use is biomimicry, where you mimic the physiology of optimal performance. And of course, that's something that happens organically with children. I mean, children run around like this all day, and they sleep very well at night. And at night, when between second and third stage of sleep, just before the REM sleep, the brain produces 50% of your hormonal release happens at night. So children always get it. This is why when your child wakes up in the morning, they'll never ask you for coffee. They're full of energy. They can do it all over again. So we have this amazing sort of God-given physiology when we're children, and it works great until we go through puberty. And once you go through puberty, of course, you can no longer concentrate lactic acid like you did as a child. You don't have time to run around all day. You're closer to your genetically predetermined adult height, so things start going sideways. So when you get to about 60, or maybe even sooner for some people, but definitely 60 or older, and you go to a doctor and they check your hormone levels, the classic response from a physician will be, well, your hormone levels are low, but it is normal for your age. It's okay. Can't do anything about it. But the truth is that our hormones do not decline because we age. We age because our hormones decline.
Mm-hmm.
So what we've done with this technology is we crank up your organic natural hormonal response, which has definitely an anti-aging positive results. Yeah, it's something that is organic. There's nothing that it's been proven over and over and again that the minute we start adding chemicals and trying to manipulate physiology from outside, the results are not what we expect, and in fact, they could be a lot worse. But if we do it right, amazing things happen. So there was one case that comes to mind. There was a 42-year-old woman who was a triathlete, a very accomplished triathlete, and she just came off. She just did a Ironman in Colorado and came to see us, and she qualified for the Ironman in Kona, the World Championship, and she had 10 days. So she came to me and says, "Peter, what can I do? I have 10 days and I want to do well at this next race." So I said, "Okay, for the next 10 days, don't do any training at all. Just come and do one VASPR session per day. That's it." So this woman, when she came for those 10 sessions, we adjusted the protocols for her that were the right protocols. And then after she completed those 10 days, she flew to Kona and did her race. She reduced her race time by 50 minutes, 50.
Wow. Just with doing the VASPR.
Yeah, the reason she did is because we completely recovered her from the previous race. So she was back. For the first time in her life, she realized how good she was. Because, if you reduce your time by 3, 4, 5 minutes, that's awesome.
Yeah. Wow.
50
That's
minutes
amazing.
Again, if you really look at how our body works, how the physiology works, and all of it has to do with not just the physical exertion and overtraining, which takes a lot of people backwards.
It's an amazing story because I think probably so many endurance athletes overtrain, right? So the potential with the VASPR, using the VASPR for high performance athletic training is immense, because I feel like most of the endurance athletes are overtraining and exhausted anyway. So then they're susceptible to injury and they probably never know how good they actually could be.
Exactly. What most people don't realize is pituitary gland is a very tiny gland, and it has a certain amount of product inside that is going to give you additional hormones. But after, it takes about 7 to 10 minutes for the pituitary gland to start to warm up and start secreting hormones. And then another 10 minutes of secreting hormones under intense exercise protocol, pituitary gland is empty. So if you continue exercising at a very high intensity, you're just recruiting cortisol. You're going backwards. You're going backwards. And most people feel that more pain is more gain, which is not the case.
Not for you.
More pain is less gain.
Lazy man workout and recovery.
Yeah. This is so interesting. Tell me, like, if you had an ideal, because I've incorporated the VASPR into my morning routine. If you had an ideal combination of a morning routine sequence, what would you do incorporating the VASPR?
Well, that's a tough. It's an impossible question to answer because, it's not incorporating the VASPR. It's incorporating the VASPR for you at a very specific time, depending on what happened in the next or the previous 24 hours in your day and how you feel and whatever. So there's several gears that we have to operate with. So one is compression. The higher the compression, the more concentration of lactic acid. The second one is resistance. And the last one is the protocol. It could be rehab recovery, personal fitness, or athletic performance. All of those things have to be correctly prescribed to get the best effect. And the beautiful thing is that people, when they start using it, after you use Vasper for 3 weeks, you actually can listen to your body and and either modify or set up the appropriate protocol. So the Vasper mantra is maximum burn at minimum effort. As long as you know that, you're good. And I've worked, we still work with a lot of athletes, that professional athletes, and again, they only relate to more pain, more gain. So things have to be painful, and you have to push through the pain and all of that stuff. And it takes a long time to explain to them, basically, that they're taking themselves backwards in doing it that way. So maximum burn at minimum effort. That's the right way to use Vasper. And once you know that, you will, even in the middle of your session, you can adjust the compression, you can adjust the resistance. All of these things can be adjusted.
One thing I did want to touch on is, again, as someone who's kind of revolutionizing fitness and healthcare, and also your approach of proactive health instead of reactive health, how do you think that collaboration between engineers, healthcare providers, and policymakers could enhance future health solutions?
Well, that kind of cooperation would be huge, and would obviously increase the health solution massively. Unfortunately, what most people are looking at in designing piece of equipment is basically being compliant to the conventional thinking, which is more pain, more gain, and not really addressing the physiology from other perspectives, like temperature control, grounding, and all of that stuff. So what we've done is actually unusual, and it's very true that the awareness of what this product does is still, hasn't scratched the surface, really.
So it hasn't scratched the surface. Where do you want to see it go? Is there anything you're super excited about, or VASPR is like upcoming development you're hoping to take it to the next level?
Yeah, you always go to the next level. There's no end to better, right? You can always be better. So to answer your question, my goal for VASPR would be that millions of people would benefit from VASPR instead of a much smaller group, because it organically addresses physiology. It doesn't take you backwards; it only takes you forwards. And so we've been around for close to 10 years, but and a lot of that was developing the equipment and fine tuning it, and we're still working on very interesting new software versions that will make a difference. But the overall awareness is not even, again, we haven't even scratched the surface. We should have thousands and thousands of these machines around the world.
Yes, but I think the time is right? Like, people are looking for solutions and, thinking in different ways and being creative, because they're at such a loss. Everyone, especially Americans, they're so sick. I mean, sometimes when I'm traveling, I feel like everyone around me is in slow motion. And I think it's the perfect time to have sort of an accelerated change in health, because what is the alternative? There's no alternative, I don't think, at this point.
The results that the alternatives provide are not what you want. And many people feel, well, I have a headache, I'm just going to pop Advil or some other pill, whatever, and I'll get out of it. So that kind of mentality is still very much in place. They don't really connect with who they are inside and what their physiology, what they can do for themselves to not just be stronger and physically in much better shape, but also mentally feel awesome. And those things are very closely tied together. So I'm grateful for this conversation we're having, because obviously this awareness is is increasing.
No, thank you so much for joining us and being on our podcast. And again, the goal is to spread awareness and provide people with the future of health and what that looks like and expose them to alternative modalities and options to get them feeling better and like their most vibrant self. I know you have a big center in Mountain View, California that people can go try out the VASPR. If people want to learn more about it and be in touch with you, where can they find you?
I have email that is accessible to everybody, and that's peter@vasper.com. So that's one way to find me. The website that we have is, still needs work, but it actually you can get a lot of information there. So one place I would suggest when you go to vasper.com, go to the science page and scroll all the way down to resources. And when you click on resources, you will see about 6 years of published science. With VASPR, VASPR uses mainstream science values. So, we're looking at hormones and endocrine system performance, for body temperature. All of these things are mainstream science values. So that's why we have a significant amount of actually published science. Not something that I say or something that somebody else says, but proven science of how this works.
Did you do that research at your center in Mountain View?
No, if we did that research in our center, it would be very low value research. We basically have no value. The research that has highest value is done by independent teaching institutions. So when you work for an institution like University of Massachusetts, they've done a lot of work on VASPR.
Oh, amazing.
Or Stanford, or any of those places. If you work in academia, you basically have two choices. You either publish or you perish. You have to publish. So those are the people that that have done research and published that research with zero involvement from us. And that's the true value of research. So again, VASPR.com, science page, scroll all the way down to resources, you can see all of that. And then if you want to find out where you can actually get on VASPR, you go to VASPR.com and there is a provider locator. So you can put in a name of your city or your zip code and it'll tell you where the closest VASPR is. So we're doing our best to get the word out.
Yes. Amazing. Yes, we are too.
We hope to help you with that. Again, Peter, thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of Centered Presents the Future of Health. And I can't wait to get on the VASPR tomorrow.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Centered Presents the Future of Health. If you're interested in learning more, please visit us at drmollybrown.com or email us at media@drmollybrown.com.